in the internet world, at home and abroad. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A warm welcome to all of you, all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 14th November, 47th Tuesday of 2023, and it's just about 5 minutes after 8 in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. Follow us on at Q95 FM Radio. The on-air phone numbers are on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Please share the live, like our pages, get the latest breaking news and reviews only on Q95, the big station. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. But tonight, along with you, our listeners, and my distinguished guest, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, financial economist and UWP leader, Team Dominica leader, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and Attorney Gabriel Christian, who will be joining us a bit later. We continue to review post our 45th year of self-rule and continue to familiarize our younger generations who know only this current DLP regime. We're going to continue informing them and familiarizing them with the previous eras of governance, from Franklin Barron to Edward Oliver Liebler, Patrick Roland John to Oliver Seraphin to Dame Eugenia Charles, Edison Chenfield James, to Rosie Douglas, Pierre Charles, and now Roosevelt Skerritt. So we are continuing from where we left off last Tuesday, because we were told by so many people that there is so much more information that we need to bring out. So we're going to do that tonight, so that our youth can learn about what these leaders and the people of Dominica had been able to accomplish then in the first 21st years after self-rule, and then compare and contrast these eras with the last 24 years and our current situation under the DLP regime led by Mr. Roosevelt Skerritt. And we will answer the questions. Are we anywhere close to being independent after 45 years? Are we where we should be in development, in foreign earnings and employment? Are we better off now than we were 23 years ago when the DLP regime came to office? We will, in fact, take some of the contemporary issues, examine them, and then compare and contrast to what the previous leaders in previous eras did about this. And I believe you may be very surprised to find that there are some very creative solutions, and the economy, society, everything worked a lot better than I think they are working today. So it is very important that we pay attention to those eras, what these leaders did, and what we should expect from our current regime in office. So we hope this conversation will help our young people to determine what are their real possibilities and potentials based on past performance of past governments and private entrepreneurs, and help them to work to become the best that they can be, to advance themselves, advance each other, advance the economy and the society, as opposed to simply depending on a political party or government to give us something, a handout, instead of learning how to earn the things we need and want, and thereby make ourselves truly independent after 45 years of self-rule. Most Dominicans believe that we are probably a lot more dependent now than we were during those past eras. So we will examine the lessons learned from the first 21 years of governance after achieving self-governance, self-rule in 1978, as well as the continued state of decline in our economy. We'll look at that. The lack of employment for our youth, the escalation of crime, the decline in moral responsibilities of the society, the lack of internationally competitive cultural industries, the idolization of foreign artists and musicians whose music and lyrics have been long rejected and discarded elsewhere, the lack of knowledge industries, lack of foreign earnings, among other things, which makes it absolutely critical that we now urgently, I say, embrace the imperative to appropriately reform. We have to go back now to appropriately reform our electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations without delay, and to do so in a manner that will yield free and fair elections on a level playing field, hopefully by the end of 2024. We can see it seems as if it has been placed on the back burner. We're getting absolutely no information, no updates as to what is really going on behind the scenes. We hear absolutely nothing from officials. We really would like to get an update from officials as to what is happening. But I believe Dominicans need to take their own initiative and go ahead and ensure that they get the reforms that they're looking for so that we can bring back good governance to Dominica, fix the economy, restore respect to our country's devastated image and reputation at home and abroad due to corrupt passport sales, due diligence failures, or maybe lack of effort to do them properly. Our young people need to know their real value. We will compare and contrast development indicators like GDP, personal and household incomes, home ownerships. I mean, people have been having homes for years, long before this regime came into office. So we look at that. We look at the question of employment, real jobs. I mean, poverty, the crime, the mendicancy, corruption, and other such bread and butter parameters during those eras of these leaders. We will also take a close look at the state of our democracy, our governance, integrity, accountability, transparency, performance, freedom of speech, or the fear of speaking truth to power in each generation, in each of these eras. We'll examine how, where, when, and why we moved away from the community of village approach to raising our children and away from the cooperative and code-mere approach to developing our communities, and how, where, when, and why we moved into individualistic fringe elements and selfish personal interests, and away from focusing on our unifying our people of all persuasions under one umbrella around the actions that must be taken to move our country and our people forward and bring our governance, our economy, our society, and our cultural industries to greater levels of local, regional, and international competitiveness. That is how we will survive. We will then look forward to greater possibilities and making better choices after appropriate reformed electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations, followed by free and fair elections on a level playing field, as I said before, to restore the good name of our country and our governance at home, in the region, and globally, on the consequences of these scandalous passport wheelers, dealers, and scammers, and to creating the enabling and policy environment that will allow Dominicans to use their creativity and hard work to improve their quality of life and living standards under progressive, caring government, as they have done in the past, and get rid of all this begging and this depending on government. We'll all look forward then to working in collaboration with whom we know to have a proven track record of performance, of followers, of organization, and requisite infrastructure on the ground to mobilize people for critically needed action, to positively move our economy, our society from crisis to recovery, and improve the quality of life and living standards of all of our people, regardless of their religion, their ethnicity, their status, or political affiliations, following the passage of reformed electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations, and free and fair elections level playing field. So tonight, my guests and you, our cherished listeners and callers, will make the case for the urgency of arriving at a consensus now on the way forward for Nature Isle, and move ahead to accomplish that objective with one crystal clear voice, I've always said, and that voice is people's power. Lots of people's power. I think that's what it's going to take to move things forward. My distinguished guest, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, European political leader, financial economist, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and Attorney General and Attorney Gabriel Christian a little later on, will share their views on these eras and give us their in-depth historical perspectives, analysis, explanations, and understandings of the issues of the day. They will hopefully provide alternative approaches to finding consensus on actions that we must take now to secure a sustainable way forward for our governance, our energy systems, for example, our culture, our health system, and for advancing our economy and society as a whole, based on the possibilities revealed from our past governance performances in past eras. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region, and globally, please tune in, call us, join the conversation, get the answers to your questions, and be a part of the solution on the big station. A huge shout out as usual to hugs and love and appreciation, much appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, other public and private sector patriots at home and abroad. We welcome every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, every nook and cranny, in every village, every community at home, in Dominica, in the region, and globally. And as always, we say thank you to Sherwin, keeping us on the air. Thank you to Lambi on the console at Q95, directing the traffic. We will take your calls a little later. People's voice always is a priority on the global view. Call us anytime in the program, and Lambi will just signal us to take your call. So let's get started by pointing out your thoughts. I'm going to get started with Dr. Andrew, but I wanted to sort of point his thoughts, if you wish to start this way, to a few contemporary issues which provide a basis for making some comparisons. For example, what would our past leaders have said about the state of our current parliamentary proceedings? What would our past leaders have thought about who can be a senator? Is Sean Douglas a sacrificial lamb for someone's personal ambition or self interest? What does Sean's dismissal say about the state of our governance in Dominica? What does it say about the state of our democracy? Dr. Andre, I'd like to give you the first word to get the ball rolling with your first 7-minute presentation in our new format.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for inviting me to break bread with the talented 10th. Let me say good evening to your listeners, those who thirst for wisdom and who thirst for redemption, and those who thirst for freedom. In many respects, we are dealing with troubling times, and the recent shenanigans in the House, in the Parliament, is further indication of it. You made reference to the dismissal of Sean Douglas. That decision obviously caught many by surprise. In fact, the timing of the decision raised serious concerns about the legitimacy of the decision. Now, let me indicate in parenthesis that obviously the leader of the parliamentary opposition has the right to dismiss any senator as she chooses. But that is not the point. The point is, why was it taken at that time, a few days before the sitting of the parliament? The excuse bandied about was that he did not obey orders. But part of the justification of being in parliament is the unfettered ability to express your thoughts untrammeled by any threat of retribution coming from your own side. The Prime Minister gave a statement in which it was said that Sean was not qualified to be a member of parliament. He didn't provide any elucidation or elaboration on what he meant by that, but one can only surmise what he may have meant. And let me respond by probably invoking the biblical admonition: let those who are without sin cast the first stone. Because one of the reasons for that bold pronouncement is a suggestion that Sean may have citizenship to an English country. And if that is the case, first of all, I don't know that the appropriate section in the Constitution, can be stretched or cast so wide a net as to disqualify Sean. But didn't the Prime Minister, Mr. G, pardon my faulty memory, but didn't he revoke, note the word please, revoke his French citizenship after he was elected a member of parliament, or after he was sworn in as Prime Minister? And if I'm wrong, correct me. If I'm right, then it means that he was a member of parliament while owing allegiance by his own hand to a foreign state. Secondly, Mr. G, I don't know, is there any elected parliamentarians as we speak who owe allegiance to the Canadian government? Is there? And the question is simple. If there is, then what is the basis for giving that false justification for Sean to have been dismissed as a senator? We could see the hand not of God but of treachery in that dismissal. I can indicate to you that in my view, Sean is a very eloquent, very bright individual. I haven't spoken to him about this, but it seems to me that Sean gave the clear indication that he would pose a serious threat to the majoritarian narrative in the House of Assembly. He would not go gently into that good night. He would not keep silent in the face of blatant wrongdoing. He would respond, much to the chagrin of those who hold sway in the government. And the question is, did that make Sean a sacrificial lamb? And if it did, does that indicate that the parliamentary opposition has been compromised or contaminated? How many of these wonderful folk speak outside of the House of Assembly on those issues which are germane to the Dominica democratic politic? Annette Sanford, who was the person of choice by the parliamentary opposition to be president, we will not regurgitate how she was treated. But suffice to say, a courageous group of ladies have taken to the streets and have made their revulsion clear in the face of how this woman was treated. That let me ask, and I stand to be corrected, but have you seen one member of the parliamentary opposition take their place next to Rosie, and those who have the audacity to walk with her? Not one? Not a single one? I may be wrong. I apologize if I am. So that there is method in that madness. There is a calculating hand of manipulation which accounts for what has transpired in the parliament. And that does not give us hope to be optimistic. We see that hand of manipulation, and it is a stake in the heart of democracy and good governance in Dominica. But alas, my 7 minutes have elapsed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. I wanted to ask Dr. Fontaine whether he had some thoughts on all of this, because this really, you see, what we're doing here, we're going to compare what is happening now for democracy or governance, what is going on there now, and what has happened in the past with people like Edward Libler, people like Rosie Douglas, people like Edison James, and so on, and Patrick John. And so I think it's important for us to analyze the contemporary and see what happened before. So Dr. Fontaine, any thoughts on some of this here?
Mr. J, very good evening to you, and of course to Dr. Andre and Lambi, and to many listeners already on Facebook and social media that are joining us, and of course for the length and breadth of this beautiful island of ours. A very good night to everyone. When I've been thinking about this, I am thinking that I don't have enough information to have an opinion one way or the other. What I can say though is that when the House of Assembly met last Friday, it was over a very important issue. So whilst it is good for us to talk about the senators and the opposition and the government, I think what is critical in my view is how the House conducts its business. And the at issue on Friday was the question of debt. And I feel a lot more qualified to talk about that particular issue, because the government was basically looking for approval to impose an additional $111 million upon the people of Dominica. Now, if you ask me, this is a big deal, because what that means effectively, in a situation when we have some $7 billion outside there, that belongs to the government of Dominica, we still are finding a way to borrow, when in fact this money should have been used to reduce our level of debt. You may recall that it was no less than the IMF who required of this government to use the CBI monies to reduce the level of debt. Now, why is that important? Why do you want to reduce the level of debt? Our debt burden as it stands is at 108% of GDP. What that means is that for every dollar that is produced in Dominica, $1.08 is the value of that debt. So in terms of the repayment, the burden that places on the country, for every dollar in revenue earned, you pay 24 cents on that dollar to service that debt. So if you're adding an additional $111 million, that is an additional $6 million that you're going to be adding to your debt servicing. So it is significant. And what this tells me is that we have a government that is really not looking into the best interest of the Dominican public. And I really want to direct my first few minutes to the people of Dominica. I want us tonight to really think very seriously about the state of our economy, the state of our country, and really search deep within ourselves. And be honest with ourselves. I want us to just spend the next minute or so to reflect very carefully on how this country has grown or not over the past 20 years. And ask ourselves a question. Are we satisfied that this government has done everything possible to allow our country to move forward, has done everything possible to allow our young people to have a fair shot at life, our young people to be able to have some confidence that they can live a good life in Dominica? I want us to reflect on that, because that's very important. Because after all, we can spend a lot of time discussing the politics around our governance, but at the end of the day, we have a government in place that, in my view, has not worked in the best interest of the Dominican public. And that last example I gave of accumulating debt, when you have all of those monies aside, why not focus on bringing these monies into Dominica? Why not focus on getting this money to suppress our debt? Because having that level of debt, it means a number of things. One very important, what that means for us as Dominicans is that you cannot maintain your public service. You cannot maintain public services. You cannot maintain health services. So we have a situation in Dominica where our health system is at the very lowest that it has been. And we have enough different health centers and no drugs. The physical infrastructure is falling apart. Our school system, teachers on that meager salary, and I'm told some teachers did not even receive an increase. A number of teachers in the high schools did not receive any increase in those last increases. So these are these very same teachers who have to put their hands into their pockets to buy dusters, to buy chalk, to buy supplies for the children. Our road system needs maintaining. Our feeder road system is in problems. And I can give you a litany, just example after example of where we have fallen short. And we can put that squarely back on the shoulders of the government. So as you reflect, Dominica, as you think about this, you need to ask yourself as well, is that the best that we can do? Is that the best that we as a people can do with this particular government? And I know sometimes we get caught up in the hype and the sensation of everything that goes on, but at the end of the day, we have a situation in Dominica where the young people are hurting, situation of increasing poverty in the country. We have a situation of ballooning debt, $1.8 billion of debt on our country, the size of Dominica. You have a situation where we've lost our way as a people. And so that is what I think we need to be really asking ourselves and focusing on, and the question then becomes, what are we going to do about it? So that's a question I'm going to pose to the people of Dominica. And as we go through the night, as we develop this particular subject of discussion, I'll be coming back to this question and I've posed to the people, because I want us to think. I want us to not just take this as another outing to that, as another talk show, as another voice on the radio. I want us to think consciously, contemplate, reflect. I want us to chew on this, reflect very seriously on where we are as a country, on the problems that we are facing, the difficulties of governance, the missing billions of dollars when the country is struggling to make ends meet, having to borrow. I want us to focus on those issues, Mr. G, in a way that will allow us to really determine whether we're on the right track or not.
So let's focus on them before we go on. So Dr. Andre, let me bring you into this conversation, because clearly Dr. Fontaine has hit the nail on the head. Look, who is the future of the country? The young people. Who are the people who have built Dominica over the years into different eras, from Leblanc's days? Our entrepreneurs are Dominican people. Those are public works that was doing all the construction works on the roads and so on. Public works is always there. They make paths, they do all kind of things. And it was our people building houses, our people doing. So what I think Dr. Fontaine is saying, in the previous eras, whereas we were really self-governing in the sense that we were doing things ourselves, our kudme, raising our children in the communities to make sure everybody comes out right. They didn't go astray and get involved in so much crime as you see happening now. We need to really, I think this is a very, very important point. It's a very strong point that has depth. Dr. Andre, maybe you can lend your voice. What do you think is going on, and what happened in the other eras that is not happening now? And what kind of governance that allows this thing to happen when there is so much money? The country has so much money out there, and yet we're still borrowing money to do things, while our infrastructure, there's nothing going on there of note. Our young people, they have no jobs. Many of them are very ambitious. They want to be very enterprising, and some of them are, but they need more help to really expand and grow. Maybe you can add your voice to that, Doctor. Like, why is it we're not seeing that happening?
It's interesting because in the last few days, or last day or two, I heard I think it was on Matt's program, one of our ministers, senior, quote unquote, talking about this power of prayer. She prayed on bended knee for help, and she got a $2 million grant thereabouts from the Saudis. And there she was singing hallelujah. Her prayer succeeded. And those who support her position clapped like trained seals. Well, let me invite those who talk about praying for help, loans. Let us pray for the liberation of the hundreds of millions of billions of dollars in mysterious accounts that are hidden from view and that are being prevented from coming to the assistance of needy Dominicans, from playing their part in infrastructural development, playing their part in providing decent homes for Dominicans, playing their part in liberating the agricultural industry by getting markets and by developing agro-industry. Let us pray. Pray for the freeing, the freedom of those billions that are kept imprisoned by greed. That is what we should be praying for, but we should not just be praying. We should be working actively to liberate Dominican resources that have not been deposited into the consolidated fund. Let us pray for the liberation of Dominica, not the incarceration of the hopes of Dominicans. Let us not destroy the environment. Let us not destroy our sacred spaces, our historic spaces, for a bowling alley. Mr. G, Mr. G, I know you love to bowl, but
Well,
does Dominica need a bowling alley?
when I was
Are you
growing,
are you kidding me?
when I was growing up, and it's annual jouer bowl, it's cricket we're talking about. You.
I thought so myself. Are you sacrificing the botanic gardens for a bowling alley? What are you going to bowl there? Mangoes? Huh? Who are you going to attract with that type of approach to governance? Why don't you develop the magistracy? Why don't you try to develop an independent judiciary? There are cases that are languishing in the judicial system for years. Don't ask me, ask Dr. Fontaine. He knows better than I. For years. And we're not talking about civil cases. We're talking about important constitutional cases. We're talking about criminal cases, despite the fact that the Constitution indicates that such matters should be tried within a reasonable period. And to add insult to injury, I heard a so-called minister of government give the most ridiculous explanation as to why the nation should not know how much that of taxpayers, not the word please, taxpayers' dollars are being used to pay some legal, so-called legal numeral from Trinidad who is getting rich on the backs of Dominica. But you're talking about comparing and contrast, Mr. G. Let me give you a sample of what the judicial system, how it operated in the 70s under the Labour Party administration. Let me just quote something to you. Do you want me to quote it to you, Mr. G, or do you want me to read the deaf announcements instead? It's your choice.
Whatever I say, you'll do what you want anyway. So
All right. Okay. There was a fellow distinguished civil servant. He retired and he started writing articles for the Star. His name was Loftus Roberts. He wrote under the pseudonym called Androcles. Here is what he had to say in the Star in September of 1970. Now listen carefully, because as I read, compare and contrast what obtained then to what obtains now insofar as the judicial system is concerned. Quote, and that's an opponent of Edward Oliver Blah, but he died in 72, so he didn't live long enough to be an opponent of the Patrick John regime. But here's what he said, quote, there is no institution which, since we cut ourselves away from the umbilical cord of the colonial system, has functioned at a higher level of competence, given more complete satisfaction, and attracted a fuller loyalty of those who it is intended to serve than the judiciary of those islands. While some governors have faltered or bowed before politicians, while the executive has in so many West Indian communities attempted to do harm and violence to the very electorate which placed it in power, the judiciary, by its steadfastness to try and proven systems of law, has been the bright shining light in what even now appears like an encircling gloom. If therefore we so often and loudly bemoan our woes, it is only proper that we count our blessings, and of all our blessings, the caliber, standard, and uprightness of our judiciary is the greatest. All power to it. Can you say the same thing today, Mr. G? I know you can say a lot of things. But let me give you a few examples of cases in the 1970s, cases which had a political flavor and how they were decided. There was no evidence, for example, that either LeBlanc or John tried to interfere with the independence of the judiciary. In 1973, the High Court ruled that while the legislation under which top officials of the CSO, including Charles Savrin, Christopher Maxime, and Ozzie Sims, were placed under house arrest, although they ruled it was unconstitutional, the house arrest conditions which made them prisoners in their own homes the court held were much too broad and restrictive. On March 6, 1975, a magistrate dismissed a September 26, 1974 charge of larceny of a bottle of coffee against DLP arch enemy Phyllis Jean Alfrey, whose lawyer was Mary Eugenia Charles. Additionally, in September 78, then Chief Magistrate Sylvia Bertrand convicted election officer Rosa Harris for unlawfully omitting to register a person qualified to be a voter, fined her $500, and issued orders of forfeiture of her salary as a registering officer, of her right to vote, and of her right to be elected a member of the House of Assembly or other government body for 7 years. Gasson, do you think that could happen today? Given all the allegations that we have heard about voter fraud and shenanigans of electoral officers, do you think any person who have failed to uphold their role in terms of the electoral process can be charged, let alone prosecuted, or convicted, or fined? It wouldn't happen. And that is an indication as to how we've regressed. And the charge has often been made that every institution of good governance has been significantly eroded and compromised. And one would have thought that the judiciary or the justice system would be a strong bulwark against that erosion, that degradation. But it is not. I could go more, but my 7 minutes, number 2, is ended. I will go in peace.
Yes, and as you go in peace, Dr. Andre, I want to go back to Dr. Fontaine. And Dr. Fontaine, we will come back to the issue of the people of Dominica and their interests, which is not being served, the interests of the people. Because this is what really matters. Because we can see the poverty, we can see the mendicancy, we can see the dependence when we're supposed to be independent for 45 years. We can see the almost total dependence on the part of some people on the political directorate and on PAL reps. There's so much we hear about PAL reps. I mean, one of those days you might be a PAL rep. I hope that we don't get the same thing, because we would terrorize you, if you start behaving like some PAL reps I'm hearing about. You wouldn't get peace with us. So the point is, though, that we'll come back to that and the young people and the people's interests and the various sectors where the opportunities are being missed and the funds are not really going into them to create the structures that we need, the major pillars we need to build to improve people's lives. But I want to spend a little, because Dr. Andre mentioned this thing about the justice system and what is happening today. But I keep hearing, I don't know how much you can talk about your own case and the case of other people that are in court now. Maybe you might not be able to say everything, but certainly, isn't it astonishing that after 5 years, absolutely no evidence can be brought to have a case so that it can be prosecuted, when such serious charges have been laid against leaders in the opposition in particular? I mean, doesn't it tell us something about the state of our democracy, the state of our jury system?
Yes, indeed. And in fact, before I comment on that, let me just do a quick footnote for the benefit of the Dominican public. Dr. Andre mentioned Phyllis Chandolfrey and her case. Mr. G, do you know who was the arresting officer for Phyllis Chandolfrey?
No.
Who arrested her in Nassif's
Sogo Fly.
Sogo Fly.
He's a born-again pagan now.
Sogo Fly was the one who arrested the honorable lady, accusing of stealing a small item from the shelves of Nassif. Yeah, but talking about the court system, and I'll give you, I can talk about my own situation. You remember that in 2011, I was sued by the Prime Minister over the issue of the sale of Dominican passports, because I was reporting very strongly at the time that we were selling our passports to crooks and to criminals. And I was talking about the missing money at that time. That was 2011, 12 years ago. And I was sued, and it went to court. I first had my first lawyer was Don Christopher, of blessed memory. May his soul rest in peace. And when Don Christopher died, I switched over to Mr. Gildon Richards, and the case went through the system in Dominica, and the the judge or the master, whoever it was that was dealing with that particular issue, decided that they were going to basically teach me a lesson. That's the only way I can imagine it, to come up against the prime minister. And so they decided that they would dismiss all of my counterclaims. In other words, everywhere I was trying to justify why it is that I was right and the prime minister was wrong, they would dismiss that, including asking the prime minister to furnish the list of names of the people. Because if I said a particular individual was a criminal and the prime minister is saying no, well, it was the onus is on him to show that list. So if I claim that this person has a passport, if you publish the list, then that was it. That particular judge dismissed everything. We appealed it to the East Caribbean Appeals Court, and they found it to be the judges were really stunned at the degree to which that particular judge went. And what they did, they asked that my defense be reinstated, but they went further. They also requested that I be allowed to introduce at that stage anything else that I wanted to, in addition to what was removed, because they felt that it was so egregious. What had happened in my case was so horrible that I should be given some kind of remedy. And the remedy was that I would be allowed, in addition to restating what I had previously, I could now introduce at that stage, introduce new evidence, but that the case would have to go back to the courts in Dominica. That was in 2014, 2015. It's been 8 years, and not a peep about this case. Not a wink, not a nod, not a nothing. It has disappeared. So that gives us that's a very concrete example of our court system. But beyond me, and you have a number of persons who are on long remand. You have individuals who are remanded for a long time. I remember when I was jailed in 2022, just about a year or so ago. I met this young man who was on remand for a long time, and his case had not been called. And you have a lot of cases like that, where criminal cases are allowed to languish in the courts, where the hands of justice moves very, very slowly. And it is true that justice delayed is justice denied, yet that continues in Dominica. You have a number of cases of, especially concerning domestic violence. You have cases against our women, cases of older men and school-age children. A number of those cases are just simply disappearing. They have not been heard. They have been dealt with outside, and it is really a mess. And it is really a sorry reflection of where we are. So nothing compared to where we were in the 1970s, where you would be assured that your case would be dealt with quickly and justly. That has now gone out the window. So, even cases where it is clear there is no evidence, yet we are dragged for court. I mean, I've been dragged for the court on this case now. Now I can talk about it. The gag order was removed because it's now a high court case, so I can speak at will about it. But it is sad. It really is a problem. Our court system is a shambles. It needs support. It needs impartial magistrates and judges who can rule on law and not simply go against you because you oppose the government. And my example is a very clear case that was clearly political, nothing to do with the law, especially where I could justify, where I could verify every single word that I had written. I was not just making false accusations against the government because I did not like the prime minister. I was talking factually, and I was well researched. I knew my sources were correct, and I published the information, and yet I was ruled against. But it just shows that we have a long way to go. And as Dr. Andre was indicating, where we were, and that system we had, where people believed that they would have a field day in court, that is now no more. That is now no more. It appears that sometimes the court system itself gives out justice based upon what party you support, and that should not be. The judiciary should be independent of the politics. And one of the major problems we have, Mr. G, is that our magistrates, the appointment of the magistrates, should not be dependent upon the Prime Minister. And that is one thing that when we come into office, we will change, to allow the magistracy to be completely independent. Let the magistrates be hired by a competent panel of judges or jurists who can appoint these magistrates. The magistrates should not be appointed by a prime minister who waves contracts in their faces and says, if you don't do my bidding, your contract will not be renewed. You cannot get justice that way. That is a fundamental flaw in our system that needs to be fixed. Okay, judges and magistrates should not be beholden to the politicians. We saw the brazen misjustice, if you want to call it that was done. Injustice is the word that was done when a judge ruled, when the case of the prime minister came up about whether or not he had a passport. He said it was not the prime minister's place to produce the passport, when the court could have ordered that he produce his French passport. Just gross misrepresentation, gross politicking in our judicial system. And at the end of the day, you have cases that are languishing there for many, many years. You have sentences that you wonder, well, where did that come from? How was that even possible?
You know, Benson, I want to get an opinion from Justice Andre about this before we move on. But before that, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us very quickly, what is the status of this incitement case? Because as far as I can recall, you were in the studios of Q95 when there was whatever it is that was going on after some demonstration in Roseau. And I believe you were charged with incitement. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And you would think that would have been dismissed in the magistrate's court. Instead, it was pushed forward to a judge and jury.
No,
it is now before the High Court.
No, that case is all old now. It's about what, 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old?
6 years. 6 years. It was February of 2017. Yeah, so it is 6 years.
What is it?
And not only that, but I still actually, what they've succeeded in doing is to split it up. So I have 2 charges. One charge is still before the magistrate's court. So I'm back before the magistrate's court on December 12th of this year. In about a month's time, I'm back before the magistrate's court on one charge, and then the other charge is now before the High Court at a date to be determined. But again, it's a cost involved. I'm hiring lawyers, I'm to pay for lawyers, having to, the cost of travel back and forth, and just the inconvenience. The inconvenience of being drawn before the courts. When you get to the court, it's adjourned.
But
you're told to come at 9 o'clock, and your case is heard at 3 in the afternoon.
But let me ask you, because I think the public has a strong interest in this. 6 years you're talking about. What is the reason why this case could not be heard and dealt with and a result come from it over this last 6? Is it a case where the prosecutors have not been able to present the case to the court? Is it a case where they don't have the evidence to give to the court? Why is it being pushed and pushed and pushed for so many years and absolutely nothing is happening?
I think, quite frankly, it was meant to, because this is not a, if you like, because I'm not guilty of any crime. It's not something that I'm guilty of and say, okay, let's get this guy convicted so we can take him off to jail. That's not going to happen. So what do? You stretch it, you frustrate, you impose cost on this individual, and that's what it has been. That has been a simple answer, because I arrived in court on many occasions after having traveled from Africa, arrived in court on many occasions just to be told that, oh, sorry, postponed for the next 2 months. Let's see, what date can we give you? Without any evidence being heard, without any movement. And even when the prosecutor came from Trinidad and he was there in the court, the same thing happened. I thought it was because he was not present previously, but even when he came on, I think it was 3 separate occasions, he was there, claiming that he was prepared to move ahead. And for some reason, the case was still deferred and postponed. So I think it has nothing to do with justice. It was just a question of basically trying to see how they can punish Thompson for standing up against the government and standing up really for the people of Dominica against the malgovernance that we have in this country.
Dr. Andre, maybe you can help us a little bit here, because we're talking about doing some comparisons of different eras and what was going on in the justice system, in the economy, in the culture, in the politics, in the parliamentary proceedings, all of those things, in the democracy. And also we have examples of other jurisdictions, how these things would be dealt with, what the laws are. Try to help us with an opinion here, because it seems to me I just cannot comprehend it. And many of our people who are listening to us on Facebook and on the radio and so on, and are asking themselves, well, look, how can a case be going on for 6 years and the prosecutors are not presenting any evidence? All they're doing is postponing the case. And why is it that this case has not yet been dismissed?
Well, the answer is not blowing in the winds. The answer is staring you. It's hidden in plain view. Bear in mind, a few months ago, the prosecutor was directed to nollie-pros a case which the CCJ had sent back to be heard before a magistrate. The prosecutor had no difficulty in obeying her master's wishes. And that's exactly what happened. Here is a case of incitement against a number of persons, all having some political affiliation with a party that is opposed to the government. And the case is languishing in the justice system for 6 years. In my respectful view, the justice system should not allow itself to be conscripted to run roughshod over the rights of citizens of any island. If there's no case, the prosecutor, whoever he or she is, should have the professional integrity to step forward and say there is no reasonable prospect of conviction. This case, quite frankly, we are no longer proceeding with it. But follow the money, Mr. G. That's all it is. That's all it amounts to. You remember the head of that SSS contingent by a Jamaican army officer had done a study or an investigation into whether there was a coup by an attempted coup by the opposition or uprising or whatever you call it. And if my sources are correct, he concluded that it was not. Was that report ever made public? N as in no. And if no, then why not? Why do you keep it hidden from view? You're keeping it hidden from view to mask the political nature of these cynical prosecutions, or should I say persecutions. Let us not dignify it with the word prosecutions. We don't need some gunslinger from Trinidad to tell us whether or not there's evidence against these accused. There's no credible evidence unless you are going to allow whoever, unless witnesses are going to perjure themselves. There is no evidence to sustain a conviction or to give rise to a conclusion that there is a reasonable prospect of conviction. So the naked political nature of this prosecution is there for all to see. You are legally crucifying these folk. You're using the justice system to advance your political goals. That is exactly what administrations from the 60s, whether it's Edward LeBlanc, whether it's Patrick John, whether it's Mary Eugenia Charles, whether it's Edison James, Seraphin, Rosie, Pierre Charles, that was a bridge too far for them. They recognized that democracy has to be preserved. They recognized that some of the institutions of governance have to be respected and their integrity preserved. And even if historically there was no election of a parliamentary commissioner, i.e., an ombudsman, but it was not ban move for these past leaders insofar as the rule of law was concerned. They respected boundaries established by traditions and established by the integrity of our leaders, that we must maintain those institutions of governance if we have to maintain our democracy. What are we maintaining now, Mr. G? Where is the IPO? Where is the Electoral Commission? Where is the independence of permanent secretaries? What about the village councils? Where are they, Mr. G? You tell me.
Well, before I let you go, Dr. Andre, I mean, two things. One, it's obvious, as you've put it here, that these cases should be dismissed for want of prosecution. And I believe in other jurisdictions, many other jurisdictions, they would have been dismissed already for want of prosecution. But as you yourself mentioned a while ago, follow the money. What is going on? I mean, we're hearing about all these foreign lawyers that are coming on every time, and cases are being postponed every time, but I'm pretty sure that they must be getting paid. So before I go back to you, Dr. Henry, let me take a call with Lambi.
Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please, with your call.
Yeah, good evening, Lambert. Good evening to your panel. What I would like to bring to the attention of the discussion is, how is it Isaac, who was calling for Skerrit to go, all of a sudden walks the plank, goes over to the other side, and all of a sudden the cases against him are dropped, yet they are maintained against Dr. Fountain and others. This is the most glaring piece of evidence that if you come to our side, we can control the court and you will be free from that charge. If that is not clear in anyone's head, well, nothing else could be. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you.
Good evening. That's an excellent point, Dr. Andre.
Yeah, it may not be clear in their heads, but it's clear in their pockets. The caller is right. I mean, it's as clear as day. You know, you come on bended knee, you lie prostrate at our feet, and we cleanse you of your sins. That's exactly what's happening. It's not only true of politicians, it's true of, well, religious leaders. Let's leave it at that. If you lie prostrate at our feet, we will cleanse you of our sins. That is the cynical message being sent today in 2023 as we celebrate the 45th year of our independence as a nation.
Yes, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about this other aspect of it, Dr. Andre. This thing of I'm understanding that we're being told that well, we cannot. The public is not entitled to information as to what is being paid to the foreign lawyers to come and prosecute these cases over how many years they've been coming here. Absolutely no cases being heard, no conclusions being drawn, absolutely no result, and yet these people are being paid. But nobody seems to want to tell the public, the taxpayers, what is happening to that money, how much these people are being paid for doing nothing.
And why should they want to tell us? Why should they want? There's no freedom of information legislation. There's no parliamentary commissioner. But then again, even if we had one, who is to say that that parliamentary commissioner would not be singing the same song as the chief electoral officer, would not be singing the same song as the head of the IPO, would not be singing the same song as many of these senior public servants who are lying prostrate at the feet, not of the Almighty Father, but of the God of Mammon, the God of money. Same result. And therein lies the problem. I see Lambi fingers up.
Lambi, you want to take a call?
Yes. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, Lambert. Gentlemen, I forgot to just add that not only was all the case charges dropped against him, but in time, he became the Speaker of the House. What kind of parliament you going to have with that? The Speaker of the House. In our Constitution, the Speaker of the House can be elevated to President of the country. This is a very high position. And this guy who was calling for Skerritt's resignation walks the political aisle and in time becomes the Speaker of the House. This is astounding. This is astounding in my mind. Good evening, gentlemen.
Astounding in any other country, my friend, but not in Dominica. Worse things are happening under the guise of good governance. And unfortunately, we have chosen to be the spectators of all that wrongdoing that is operating on a daily basis.
Let me ask the caller to hold on. Ask the caller to hold on, Lambi, while Chandra finishes. You want to take the call?
Yeah, take the call.
On the overseas line, caller, go ahead.
Yes, good evening to you, Lambi. Good evening to gentlemen on the panel. How are you guys doing? This is Lennon here.
Good. Lennon, how are you doing?
Hi, good evening.
I'm fine. I'm fine. Hey, so Dr. Andre, I heard you mention, and I've heard several people talk about Freedom of Information Act in the public domain. And we say we can't get information because there is no Freedom of Information Act. But let me ask this question. In the United States, there is a process of classification of documents where state documents become secret, and they become secret because of the possibility of injury to, intelligence gathering information and certain techniques. But even that process had been set up through the Congress and through acts of Congress and through law. Do we have any laws in Dominica that specifies how documents should be classified and how state secrets should be kept? And if we do have that law, I would like to know when were these laws enacted? What are the rules for the classification of state secrets? Who are the people responsible for classifying those secrets? What process does the parliament take to classify the secrets? And if there is none, I would really like to know, because if there are no laws for the classification of secrets or classifying documents in Dominica, then there should be no law for freedom of information. So you only have a Freedom of Information Act because the process through which the state is allowed to keep secrets has potential information that is of public interest. And if we're saying that we cannot find information because there's no Freedom of Information Act, I think there is a serious problem in what we are talking about. And I would really like to get some additional information on that, because you can't have a Freedom of Information Act if there are no laws in Dominica that talks about what actions of the state that should be deemed state secrets. I don't know if there is, and if there is, I'd like to be enlightened about that. But gentlemen, before I go, I would like to say again, what binds us as a people together is the Constitution. And if there are individuals in the highest office of the land who are disobeying the laws that they themselves are putting in place, then they should be open to being removed by any means necessary. Because if the Constitution is not what guides your action as a government, then elections and voting should not be what guides your stay in office. And I rest and will listen offline.
Thank you.
Well, First of all, I'm not aware of any State Secrets Act analogous to what exists in the States. But it seems to me that even absent such legislation, let me give you an example. In 2000, after the fall of the Edison James administration, you had a senior counsel who publicly announced that he basically was hired to do a commission of inquiry into corruption in the James administration. In fact, like perhaps Pontius Pilate, he made it a point of saying that he was doing that free of charge, a service to Dominica. Oh, that was so nice of him. 1 year after, in September of 2001, Julian Prevot, I know him well, we were in sixth form together, asked in the parliament, words to the effect, he asked of then Minister Ambrose George, words to the effect, how much money has the senior counsel received for the work he's done in that commission of inquiry, which came up with the lame conclusion that there is a prima facie case of wrongdoing, but certainly not one which would warrant any type of criminal charge or charges. Or he left it to the discretion of the government. But that legal standard is so low that, quite frankly, you wouldn't want to prosecute someone for stealing a packet of chiclet at the Q95 radio station. Ambrose George said that the family company received tax benefits of over $200,000 during the time when that senior counsel was involved in this commission of inquiry. He said that in Parliament. Contrast that to what obtained a few days ago when this minister from Maho gave a long alleluia, totally nonsensical, as to why it cannot be publicly revealed what taxpayers' money or how much taxpayers' money are being used to pay these lawyers from Trinidad and Tobago. It's a matter of public interest. And that, quite frankly, in my respectful view, should be the justification why that information should be within the public realm, just as the persons who were appointed ambassadors. The names of those persons should be within the public realm because it is a matter of public interest that we know who our diplomats are. So in my view, what is happening now is that the government is being shrouded by a cloak of secrecy. Memorandum of understanding, how much these lawyers are being paid, who our ambassadors are, and a host of other issues. This fund outside, this MMM, whatever EC, whatever you want to call it, the true cost of some of these projects. To what extent are there any feedbacks being paid? What about these hotels that are springing throughout Dominica? What about those buildings? What about those who are purchasing property with funds which cannot be accounted for by their legitimate incomes? These should not be secrets, but they are in Dominica. I can assure you they will not be secrets. They would not be secrets in some of our sister or brother islands.
And Thompson, I wanted you to come back in here because you have been an integral part of all of this, and you're a historian. You've written about these eras and some of these leaders and what's been happening over the times. You yourself have a vision of what Dominica could be like. I mean, based on how it was developing from Edward Leblanc. If we extrapolate from Edward Leblanc's days, what was happening in society, in the economy, in the culture, and the democracy, and parliamentary proceedings, and so on, the decorum, you can see where we ought to be 45 years later. But look at where we are. I want you to talk about that a little bit.
You know, it really pains me, as my friend would say, it pains me to think of where we are now and the promise that we had so many years ago. under Edward Oliver Blah, with the children of the peasantry being able to go to school, access an education, go overseas to study and come back and contribute to the country. Farmers being able to make money, and to see, agriculture booming, and to see, different businesses being set up, and the pride that was there in Dominica, population growing, and to think that all of that has been reversed. It is really, truly painful, because in a lot of ways, we, Dominica avote. You know what it is to be avote? You never see an avote mango when it should be ripe. Yeah, that's what we are. We avote. We should have really made a lot more progress. The fact of the matter is our growth, as we're saying, has been stunted. And a lot of it has to do with the last 20 years. The first 20 years of our life as an independent country, we were rightly proud. We were going places. Nous take a profité. After 20 years, the growth stopped. No avote at Trelma. And it is really sad. And in a lot of ways, some of the blame has to go with us. And that's why at the start, Mr. J, I ask our people to really think and to really focus and contemplate on where we are. Because when you think of the promise we had, the promise for manufacturing, we had DCP, we had Bello, we had the Campbell Industries, you had Paul's Pastoroni, all of these indigenous manufacturing concerns that were coming up. The Essential Oils people were raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. When you had all of that in manufacturing, I said, you had the agriculture sector that was booming, and a lot of things was happening. There was that sense that the country was going someplace, and you were proud to be a Dominican. I remember even as late as in 1980s, when I was at university at UB, we were ahead of the St. Lucians, ahead of the Vincentians and the Grenadians in terms of where our economy was. They were looking up to us, and now we are lagging behind all of those countries in every single metric. In terms of students who finish high school, a number of students are dropping out of high school right now. Something that was unheard of before. We used to have practically all the students used to make it through high school. Now we have dropouts. I remember a few years ago, I returned to the academy, and I was so happy to go back to where it all started for me. And when I entered the class, they told me that was a class of doublers, a whole class, Mr. G, of kids who were doubling first form. I was flabbergasted. I could not believe this, because I had been there as a student. I had returned there as a teacher. But when I taught there, everybody was sent up to the second. And then you had a whole class, 30-odd something kids that were asked to stay back in first form, a class of doublers. I could not believe this. So in every metric, we've gone back. Our education system, Sahavote, our legal system that we just spent some time discussing, same thing. Our economic system and even in terms of how we, our legal, everything you can think of, our public service was the envy of the rest of the world. Our public service has deteriorated to the point where people are promoted not on the basis of their hard work and dedication and competence, but because of their allegiance to one man, the prime minister. That is it. If you look at the line of public, especially our PSCs and those at the very higher senior levels, yeah, there may be a few deserving, but the vast majority of those people got their positions because of favoritism. I mean, everything, Duvernay, Tortillé, tie up in this country. And that is where we are in Dominica, and that is a very sad place to be. And you know, when I think of where the country really should have been, you know, we should be producing our own things. We should be having research in, you know, in agriculture research. We should be looking at new means of you know, growing staff, of doing things. Our young people should be at the forefront of the information revolution. You know, our young people should be there developing apps and doing things, and, you know, going places. Instead, our young people, their wish is to become drug men and drug people. That's the wish of some young people in Dominica. You know, but all of that has been brought about by the malgovernance that we have in Dominica. And that's what people need to understand. It is not by mistake that we are where we are. We are where we are because of the malgovernance in this country. Government that will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. They may not tell you in Parliament, but it is well over. It is in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars they've already paid to these 3 or 4 lawyers from Trinidad to prosecute their own people that have committed absolutely no crime in the island. You know, I'm not even, I don't think I've stolen a 25 cents. Well, probably when I was smaller, I probably did, you know, to probably buy some ice pop or something. But to be prosecuted, to be dragged through the court system, simply because you oppose the government, and for the government to take the hard-earned taxpayer dollars and not refuse to even say how much. Whilst I don't know the exact amount, I can tell you without fear or favor that it is well in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, whilst our schools go without supplies. No paracetamol in the hospital. We have leaky roofs in schools. We have rotten doors in health centers. Boakapui, the rain is rotting doors and they cannot be replaced in health centers in this country. Police stations. You don't even want to go there. You don't want to watch. You don't want to see them in dilapidated conditions. And you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to prosecute your own people. Spending resources to prosecute your own people. Something is wrong with that picture. So yes, we have not progressed. I remember there was a very popular play by Alvin Bully. And they would ask the question, you think we've made progress? And that's the question in the middle of the skit. You think we've made progress? I think not. I don't think we've progressed as we should have. I don't think we have gone where we should have gone. And, you know, but we have an opportunity though, Mr. G. I don't want to leave anyone with the belief that this is the end of the road. I believe we have the opportunity to change that. I believe we have the opportunity to do things better, but it begins with removing this government from office at the next elections. As simple as that. We have to start over. We cannot just give up. We cannot just give in. The way we do it, get rid of this government, and then we start again. We did it in the past. We can do it again.
You know what, Thompson? I got a little thing there from somebody. They said, "Garçon, c'est pour ça qu'a gagné de moi. You can gascon in. Dio sorti là avec nous venez plus fâché." So the point is that what you're saying is right. I think Dominica has a bright future ahead of it, but it needs to have the right people who would give it the right direction. It's happened before. You know, it's not like we've never done this before. You know, Edward Oliver Cleveland did it. Farmers got wealthy. They bought their transport cash. I mean, how many of the young people know that? You know, if we had continued what Edward Oliver Cleveland was doing, which Patrick John tried to do, what do you think would have been the situation for young people? They would not have had to migrate in these large numbers to other countries in the so-called greener pastures. They would not have had to do that. Because a lot of people, as you say, we're already making progress. And think about Paul Passeroni and Ben Deschoux and Paul's Plastic and Candle Industries and Blows Agro Products and all these teas and essentials oil. You used to take Vectiver when you go up to Granby, all Pishin and so on, Vectiver, all the side of the road, they're drying up, people making all kind of things with that. Right? You have patchouli, and then you have all these essential oils coming. Lambi, did you want to take a call before we go on?
Please go ahead, caller.
Yeah, blessings, gentlemen. Blessings to you all. Good evening.
Blessings, sir.
Amen.
Yeah, good evening.
Dr. Andre Gonheidman, I do hear him again.
I hear you. I giving you silence. I'm giving you respect.
Dr. Fountain, blessings to you. Mr. G, blessings. Rambi, blessings to you.
Yes,
all.
indeed. Blessings.
Doc, I heard you said it, and I am just so concerned to be removed, this vice to be removed. By what means? By what means? Because, can you hear me clearly?
Very
I
clear.
can hear you.
Very clear.
Okay. I am asking by what means? It is a deliberate effort, it may be systematic as well, to not maybe it is, to not facilitate electoral reform. Before they can be removed, electoral reform has to be facilitated, and with no intention, and different narratives are being created. So we really forget about the advocacy for electoral reform. It is sickening. So I was telling Mr. Linton yesterday, I tell him, is the DLP still, but it stands for something slightly different. It is the Dominica Lethal Party. The Dominica Lethal Party. That's what it is, because it seems like it's death and destruction these people want in this country. And this is not freedom. This is not the Dominica Labour Party anymore. What I am seeing, these people, I want to admire and appreciate and thank Dr. Andre, Dr. Fountain, Mr. G for facilitating the whole conversation, Lambi always there hosting and all of that, and everybody else who have contributed to, trying to enlighten the people, because it's like, I don't know what is fixed in the head, what is embedded in the heads, why there is that mental blockage. And if a man feels like he become irrelevant and ineffective, which he really is, and he can come and say, tell Thomas Layton I run things, to fool himself that he is in control. I see the Chinese and Anthony Hayden. He is not in charge of what is happening. First of all, he lacks the intellectual essence or ability to run Dominica. And he wants to do it unilaterally, leaving great minds out like Dr. Fountain, Dr. Irvin Andre, and all the other great minds we have in Dominica at home and abroad. So everything is falling apart. Or could it be, in closing, the man is being ordered wrong like a little boy, what he can and what he cannot do. Can you imagine? You have your billions in the hands of a Lebanese. What is going on in Dominica that they said, to whom much is given, much is expected? I understand the brain drain, but are you all deaf and not inclining to what is happening to Dominica, to not sound the alarm, to not intervene or participate in the fight against this criminal? It is sad. We are from where we are right now. Is it retrievable? It's a little piece of rock. It seems like it has gone. And to listen to Dr. Fountain, Mr. G, my friend there, why is his name again? Dr. Andre. And I'm listening and I'm saying, time after time, and I'm saying, look at the effort. But who is listening? Who is ingesting what is being disseminated? It is so sad. Thanks for the time. Blessings, gentlemen.
And thanks a lot for that. What I would say is this, that every time we've come here, Dr. Andre, there's something that we've always said, and Thompson, you said it too. What is going to take? You're not going to get electoral reform. We said that a long time unless the people take it. We said so long ago in many different programs. And we also said, and we said it again tonight, there is something called the people's power. You require lots of people's power. And we also keep saying that you cannot expect people doing little fragmented things everybody want to have some little thing. Everybody need to gather under one umbrella and speak with one strong voice in a way that is organized already, that has a ground game, that has a track record of getting things done. Is no point trying to form all kind of little fragmented pieces everywhere and expect you're going to get anything done. If you really want the people's power, then you have to bring all the people together under one umbrella. Something that you know can work. Let the people speak with a very loud voice and say, listen, we want electoral reform. We want it now. We want free and fair elections. So we have to have electoral reform before. I believe, and I want to welcome Gabriel Christian. I know he's worked very hard today because he told me so, and I believe it. Every time he tells me things that I always believe it. So I know he worked hard today. And I wanted Gabriel to make a little contribution at this point as soon as he's ready. Because certainly, I think, Gabriel, I think Blessings is right. I think the question is, how do you get what it is that you want? The only way to get it is the people's power, the law. You see, one of the things we said very early o'clock, Dr. Andrew, when we were talking about governance and talking about all the constitution and talking about, we always said one thing. The Prime Minister of Dominica, the office of the Prime has too much power. The Constitution allows the office of the Prime Minister too much power. In the United States, for example, you have the legislature, you have the House, you have the Senate. The executive branch cannot just do things without the approval, certain things without the approval of the Senate and the House. And then the president signs up on it. In Dominica's case, there is no distinction between the cabinet, the legislative branch, and the administrative branch, the executive branch, because the same people in cabinet are also in the legislative branch, and they have the majority. If you would like to come in and make a little contribution at this point, certainly happy for you to do that.
A blessed good evening to you, Mr. G. A blessed good evening to Brother Irving, Brother Thompson, and Brother Lambie at Master Control, and Sherwin behind the mixing board, wherever he may be. Thank you all. Yes, indeed, I oftentimes have to labor late into the evening to set the captives free, and so I apologize. I was not able to benefit from the illuminatory input of our brothers, who I'm sure spoke well. But I am very reflective this evening. Very reflective of the fact that we are a small country. Brother Blessing spoke well when he talked about the brain drain. Well, there's a reason for that. People live societies where they are not attractive, and those societies fail to allow them the full measure of opportunity, of equality of opportunity to expand and expound upon their creativity and their entrepreneurship. Simple as that. If you feel constrained, if you feel that you don't have the room to breathe and to live and to prosper, you'll leave. And it seems to me that this is the objective of the regime, so that it can provide the free rein for those who have bought their citizenship to take over this gem of nature that God bequeathed us. Let me speak to this for a moment. In the foreword of the very brilliantly penned biography of Edward Oliver LeBlanc, done by one Erwin Winston Andre, I had the honor and privilege to write that foreword, and I said, as a sort of preamble, something that Frederick Douglass said. Frederick Douglass said, and I quote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." Let me repeat. Power concedes nothing without the demand. My Dominican people, what do we demand of our civil servants? What do we demand of our legislative branch? To come into the House of Assembly and dress up and so on in fancy hats and $4,000 or $5,000 purses and all kinds of scarves around the neck where we don't need it because we're a hot country? What do we demand of our legislators? As if they are in a menagerie on the what do you call that? The modeling, what do you call that thing where the models go down? The runaway, and some judges there of taking notes. Is that what we're demanding? What do we demand of a prime minister who goes to Dubai and meets with his wealthy friends, and doesn't come back and tell us how that has moved the needle one iota closer to a better and a more prosperous Dominica. Okay, you're all over the place with your fancy suits, your rich friends. I just saw a video where a tourist in a motorized scooter fell into a pothole on the sidewalk and had to be rescued by noble Dominicans. The sidewalks and the Road Improvement Project was supposed to have happened more than a decade ago. Has it happened, Dominicans? Have you demanded that of the government? But now, the only green space in the country, which is the Botanic Gardens, we're taking a loan now from Saudi Arabia to do to the gardens what should not be done. It would essentially eradicate the gardens. And what about the Road Improvement Project and the sidewalks and the gutters that give off a particular odor that is not pleasant to the human nostril, or nostrils, plural? Are we demanding that kind of governance? And so I wanted to take a moment this evening to talk to the issue of the nation's financial resources. Power concedes nothing without the demand. People are lamenting the lack of economic activity and poverty of means, and yet billions of dollars resides in the hands of a mysterious person from Lebanon or someplace who was not part of our legislative branch. He was not elected. I do not know him to have placed in anything in the public tender. So that is, you see, one of the things you do in procurement law, which I had the good fortune of studying, is that when you put something into tender, you have to give a history, almost like a resume of your company. Who are you? Where do you come from? What's your balance sheet? Are you licensed and bonded? Where are your architects? Where are your engineers? Where's your reference list of the projects you have successfully completed? And based on that and your competitiveness in the price offered and other factors considered, you will be given the contract. But in developing states like Dominica, what the governments also do that are wise and sincere is they also place another burden on those who are making bids for billion-dollar contracts in airport construction and the like. It's called local content. It's called technology transfer. It's called business mentorship. So in local content, you have to have X amount of local contractors. You have to have X amount of local mentees. They will make sure that local engineers who are new, local architects who are new, local engineers in certain areas that are new, work alongside the well-established company. So at the end of the contract, you have the building up of local capacity. So it's no good to say that Dominicans cannot do it. Because when you and I grew up, Sheridan, when you and I grew up, Thompson, when you and I grew up, Irving and Brother Lambie, and those who are not present on screen, Dominicans built the ministerial building, of course, with some local international input. Same with the police stations. Same with the bridges and the fire and police headquarters and other major construction. Same, as I mentioned last time, with the Riverside Apartments. And now you're having a depletion of local capacity because people have been placed into dead-end jobs of never-ending poverty called NEP or NEP. As opposed to saying that we are going to put forth a procurement system, or we're going to implement or abide by the procurement system that's in place and make sure that local people are at all levels integrated into public procurement, public contracting, so that we accrue the competence and the money recycles once, twice, 3 times within the local economy. So that's my contribution this evening, and that is to say that unless we as a people educate ourselves, demand of the government good governance, and not only have electoral reform, I believe that the failure of the First Republic after 78 has failed. Sheridan, you're correct. I believe we should have a legislative branch that's elected separately from the executive branch. I really do believe that, because you're absolutely correct. What happens is this in Dominica. You elect a party on a party roll. The prime minister is the one who has the majority of the members of the legislature. He then decides who the cabinet members are. The same government then hires the judges. Do you see where I'm going? I'm Sheldon Gregoire. What do you have? A dictatorship. So in England, that has worked because in England, there is a culture where Suella Braverman, whatever they called her, was forced out of office because she dared to say that the people who were marching for Palestine, this is what she did. She didn't sell passports to crooks and criminals. She didn't steal any money simply because she made the statement that was really one of bias and absolutely reactionary. She was forced out. I told somebody the other day, just this week from Dominica, like him or not, what's the guy's, Boris Johnson? During COVID, did he sell any passports to crooks and criminals? Did he give the public contracting system in England to some mysterious foreigner? No. Merely because he violated COVID protocol and had a couple of people at his home for a party. And because of the Magna Carta principle that no man is above the law, what happened to him, Sheridan?
Well, he got terminated.
Okay. And here we are in Dominica. Because we lack a culture of democracy, we're in a full-blown dictatorship, all kinds of things are happening and our people remain docile. So until we remove that docility and we make those demands, as you've said, Sheridan, the power of the people is much greater than the people in power. Thank you very much.
Yes, and of course, Dr. Andre, I mean, I'm sure many people are wondering, well, listen, when the regime in office says that, no, you cannot have access to the information as to who ambassadors are, and no, we cannot tell you how much money we're paying to foreign lawyers to do absolutely nothing for 6 years, but come in there and just keep adding to their bill, and no, we cannot tell you this, and no, we cannot tell you that. What is the recourse of the people? I mean, how do people go and fight this and say, listen, because as you can see then, as Gabriel is saying, it is the same prime minister that appoints the magistrates and the judges, and these people pay their salaries and decide whether they should be appointed or not. Your thoughts?
Well, the answer is clear. And let me make a direct response to something Blessing said. Blessings, not just Blessings, but other persons, whether it's the Wednesday walkers, whether it's the Roses that walk to protect the honor and integrity of the Annette Stanfords of Dominica, they constitute the stones that the builder refused, those that became the head cornerstone. In other words, in moments of crisis, leaders are born and leaders are made. And even in our little world of crisis, emergency, the moral crisis that Martin Luther King speaks of, we see leaders emerging, not at the rate that we would like to expect, but they are emerging. And they are emerging as legitimate voices of resistance. Legitimate voices of resistance. Because they are not rich persons. They are humble persons of humble backgrounds, having much to lose, having to face the wrath of retribution from the directorate. And that has not hindered them. They have shown a moral courage that we can take a final example of. And in my view, it's just a matter of time because things are not getting any better. The lot of the people are not being elevated. On the contrary, even those who are getting houses, they have to keep quiet because they do not own the edifices where they live. They have to endure the stench of poor workmanship in silence. And in previous talks, Mr. G, have given the example of a political dancer called Monster B and how he was ignominiously, I should say, a family member from the unit he had been given when his body was still warm. So in other words, your possessions are illusory. They're not real possessions. They're not possessions in the fashion that persons like Patrick John from 1974 to 79, who built over 400 houses for persons who needed help, who at least gained that sacrament of integrity, ownership. They gained that, and hence they were able to build their houses. In their own way, they were able to build intergenerational wealth, because these are buildings they could pass on to their relatives after they'd moved on. They didn't have to hand the key or send it to the ministry. This is what we're talking about. Empowering people, giving them a stake in their own island because of the work they've done, and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-great-grandparents. This is what it's all about. This is real development of the people, in empowering them so that they can open their own little fields of dreams, their plots of land, their fields of bananas, of grapefruits, of oranges. This is what it's all about. This is the development that means something. Not giving people a temporary abode to buy them, to sell their souls for a vote. None of the other leaders did that in the past, not to that extent.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew. Lambie, did you want to take a call?
Yes, there are two callers in there right now. Let's take this first one. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
To be honest with you, something has to be wrong with our constitution. Something has to be wrong with Dominicans. Because I cannot understand, because the Prime Minister is Finance Minister, at a stroke of a pen, he could just raise his salary by 30%, raise the other salary by 20%, and nobody to object him, and he will do it without making the nation know that he take a raise. I mean, something has to be wrong with Dominicans. And even when you are telling that they don't want to believe, I don't know what to say. I feel sorry for Dominicans. Dominicans are being abused by this guy. We need to get this guy out of power. He's keeping the country. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. Lambie, do you have another call? Okay, so let me go back to you, Thompson, because I'm really and truly, I think the caller just raised an important point. I mean, all about we're talking about the use of the resources of the country. We're hearing about all this large increase in salary. Let's go back to Lambie before we continue with you.
Caller, please go ahead with your call.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Brother Christian, what is wrong with Dominicans? Have they all fallen asleep? What is wrong with them? A man gives himself a raise, gives his ministers, the cabinet members a raise, and yet drivers who are going to take kids to school cannot be paid, and the people are sitting there and they're enjoying it like nothing is wrong. What is wrong? The idiot tells them that if you criticize me, it's like you're criticizing the Lord. What is wrong with Dominicans? Are they in a political coma or straight out coma? What is wrong with them, Brother Christian? Tell me. I want to know. Thank you.
Well, that's an excellent question.
Well, may I?
Go right ahead, Gabe, and then we'll let Thompson chime in on that.
Indeed. There is in social psychology something called the Stockholm Syndrome. Have you ever heard of that, Brother G? That is when a person has been captured, placed in confinement, kidnapped, and before you know it, they begin to develop an affinity for their kidnapper. Their jailer now becomes someone to be adored because they have exercised power. So the human being is a very interesting human being. Remember, the Germany of 1933 that gave birth to Adolf Hitler and the Hitler regime was a Germany that gave us Einstein and Beethoven and Thomas Mann and Sigmund Freud. Those were Germanic people. That was the same Germany that then abdicated its reason and gave it to a tin pot dictator, a corporal, had field marshals, folks who had been to military academies, who were high in society, eating out of his hand. Jim Jones in the Guyana jungle had people who had first degrees, second degrees, told them he was going to give them something to drink to send them to heaven, and they drank it. The human being is an interesting creature. That is, if you tell certain people a lie long enough, and Joseph Goebbels taught us that dictum, you tell the lie long enough and big enough, they will believe it. My God, my word, it's happening right now in Dominica. That's the sad reality, caller. Our people are indeed in a deep sleep, in a coma. Now, when and how our people wake up is going to be a function of our wisdom, those of us who can see, those of us who are not drinking that Kool-Aid, in keeping the fire of resistance burning, in encouraging, in uniting, in showing love and kindness and wisdom and efficiency in operational art, with the hope and desire that folks slowly but surely shall open their eyes. I'll defer to Brother Thompson. I'm sure he has even a more remarkable addition to that.
Yes, I'm sure. And Thompson, I mean, isn't it just really, I mean, very bad that see that you're going to give yourself that kind of salary increase when there's hundreds and hundreds of public officers who get absolutely nothing, and they deserve so much more because what they're already getting is so little. They can hardly make ends meet. You don't give them this pay increase. For years, you've been giving them 0 and 1 and 1%, but then you've taken all this massive increase in salary. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really obscene. That's what it is. I mean, this is the same prime minister, let's not forget, that is taking over $64,000, I would say probably close to $70,000 now, for his living expenses every month, when the average public servant has to work 12 years to get that kind of money, to make that money. I mean, that is where we are. You have to work all of those years to make the amount your prime minister is taking in 1 month. And yet he cannot find the decency to give these individuals a raise. A number of teachers did not qualify for these wage increases. Our hardworking teachers did not qualify for these wage increases. We are told the drivers, we are told those at the lower levels of the public service did not receive it. So what kind of government is this? What kind of human is this that would give people homes and not do like what Patrick John did or Mary Gina Charles did when they built homes for people and give them the keys to their home so that they could use it to build wealth, but instead stand ready to take it away from them as soon as they die or something? I mean, what kind of conscience dictates that you behave in that manner to a people? It's almost like all sensibilities are gone. And Gabriel gave a good example as to why that might be the case. Stockholm syndrome. Some people find nothing is wrong, and that to me is the most stunning thing. That there are people who will actually defend that kind of behavior, who will say, well, yeah, he deserves it, and the people deserves what they get. I mean, really, a government should be there to look after the interests of the people. And bear in mind, every single cent that this prime minister has is on account of he being prime minister, whether it's through the sale of passports or through taxes. It is through the people of Dominica. So it's not something that he made independently or he got to independently, So Mr. J is just so sad all around, and I feel deeply for the people who are struggling to make ends meet. Prices continuing to rise every day. Things are getting worse, and you have to make do with $1,200 EC dollars a month or $1,500 EC dollars a month. Some people less than 1,000 EC dollars a month. You have to make do. I remember talking to one of the NEP workers who tells him, man, it's tough. When he gets his $500, the most he can do is to buy a quarter bag. He'll probably buy a quarter bag of sugar and probably 2 other items, and that is it. The $500 is gone. He has to wait until next month, until the other month to get anything, So it is really painful, and that's where we are in Dominica, and yet our people seem to be accepting all of that, and that is why call after call is asking the question, what is wrong with our people? Why are we allowing ourselves to go through this? And that is the question probably the psychologist among us can answer.
Well, let's certainly hope so. I mean, but somebody has to provide the answers. I would like to let's start off tonight by providing some of the answers, because you can see our time is running down already. And Gabriel, I want to go back to you, and you can use this as part of your final words as well as we wind down, because it seems to me that nothing is going to happen unless you have the masses of the people demanding that they want something to happen. It's not going to happen if Dominicans are fragmented, and some people are saying, boy, if I go and open my mouth, if I go to a demonstration, I will not get that little brown paper bag that might have a little $20 of groceries in it. My child may not get a scholarship. The point of the matter is, if we go back and look at the other eras, where you had the LeBlancs and the Patrick Johns and so on, they all give scholarships. People didn't have to go down on their knees to get scholarships. They didn't push people when they got something. I mean, people were able to get jobs or find work or develop their farms, and people were able to provide for themselves. Now people have been placing, you mentioned the Jim Jones situation and other situations. Now people have to struggle, and then the people are made to believe that, listen, I'm the only one, I'm the only answer. You know, if not me, then what? You have to just depend on me. So you don't open your mouth and say anything. If you say anything about me, it means that you're an enemy of the country, enemy of the state. Gabriel, your thoughts on some of that and what we need to do to command the people's power, because the people must realize that they have the power and they have to begin to use it.
Well, thank you very much, Brother G. Last week, we were here, and by God's grace, we'll be here again in the future, educating. And it occurred to me the following. You're not under the thumb of Roosevelt Skerritt. Thank God Brother Lambie is not under the thumb of Roosevelt Skerritt. Neither is the learned judge or brother out there in South Sudan, nor I. It's for that reason that we have a modicum of self-respect, dignity, and authority of our personhood and our self-determination to speak out and demand what our people who've been rendered docile, enslaved mentally, supine, and servile cannot do. Let me speak to you a moment on this. I got a call from the daughter of a very distinguished Black Dominican female entrepreneur. She's well known. I will not call her name. And she said to me, Christian, we need your help. We need your help in the diaspora. She wasn't talking about me because I'm but part of the sum total of our people. If without the diaspora, we're nowhere. We don't even have businesses anymore to support what it is we're trying to do in the creative arts. She was trying to do something in the creative arts. And she talked about the businesses that existed in the past that she could go to get sponsorship. They do not any longer exist. That, my friends, is why what we said last week about creating that instrumentality of that cooperative. What did our formerly enslaved ancestors, who were not given any compensation at emancipation for their years of unrequited toil, what did they do? Well, they did something called Kudme. Thompson knows what that is. You know what that is, Mr. G. Brother Irving and Brother Lambert, they know what Kudme is. Each one teaching one, each one helping one. That's what we have to do, because our people have been rendered comatose by learned helplessness. Rendered comatose by a certain degree of learned helplessness. So a lot of people know what to. They may even know how to, but they've not been able to summon the will, the intestinal fortitude to stand up, because they're afraid that if they do, like the students at Grambling and other places who are speaking in whispers, their fees have not been paid. but they were afraid if they spoke up about something that is supposed to be their rights as Dominican citizens, that they would be penalized. And by being penalized, you lose the opportunity. So that sort of learned docility and helplessness can only be overturned by going back to those true and tested methodologies of our people, when first, with almost insurmountable odds of class and racial deprivation and hierarchy, they turned not on each other like cannibals, as they would like us to be in the regime that is seeing nothing wrong in our young people killing each other. We are offering them the opportunity to say, let's get together in the Shoppers Cooperative. Let's get our fisher folk together. Let's get our shopkeepers together. Let's band together, because at the end of the day, we have the key to unlock our people from the sickness of their minds. That I do believe, by God's grace.
Thank you, Gabriel. Dr. Fontaine, your final thoughts? I mean, obviously, I mean, you go back, way back. I mean, you grew up in the days when our parents were farmers, and you participated in carrying your share of bananas on your head, and you were able to go and get the water when you didn't have water. We didn't have lights, we didn't have phone, we didn't have anything. We had to use bullseye sometimes and kerosene lamp. You know, we had to send telex a few years later, but we didn't have cell phone. We couldn't make no calls to anybody. But we survived, we managed, and we sent our children to school. Your thoughts on some of that and that could be thing, because then we saw it happen and it worked. You want to unmute your mic?
Yes, indeed, Mr. G. There was that beauty of the village, you know, and the ability for us to get together and do things, you know. My father built a 3-bedroom brick building long before I was born in Granville, with the help of the villagers, you know, and that's just how people did things, you know. They came together, and then this time it would be your turn, the next time it would be someone else's turn, and so on. And we got things done. There was that spirit of camaraderie and the village spirit and the wanting to help. But we've been sadly divided by politics. Politics has been our main divider. We do not have tribes in Dominica. What we do have is politics. So politics serves as almost the same tribal factor. I'm in a country where tribal divisions are tearing the country apart. And yet, although we don't know tribes in Dominica, we see the same tendencies. And it is along political lines, you know. So in a lot of ways, politics has done a disservice to Dominica. Our kind of politics has done a disservice to Dominica, and we need to get out of that. You know, we need to get out of that. We need to be more supportive of each other. You know, support our own, and the fact that our government is leading in a way where they're favoring foreigners over Dominicans, where our young people wanting work can only sit on the side and watch others come from abroad to drive a caterpillar, to drive a dump truck, or to be sweepers on the road, or to even serve water to the persons working. These are things that Dominicans did, and now they can no longer do it because our government will not allow them to do it. I mean, there is things that I can say, the number of things that have gone wrong with our society. And a lot of it we can point to just bad governance. And that's why we need to get to a situation where we can reverse that. We need to get to a situation where we can begin to care again for each other, irrespective of which political party we support. You know, care for each other, look out for each other, support each other, help our businesses grow. I mean, I cannot believe I lived in a country where a president called on people to boycott a local business, and people actually did it. You know, the president called for people to boycott a local business, and Dominicans decided not to go on the business. They ended up folding. You know, so it's just extremely sad where we are. And I know, Mr. G, we are better people than this. I've lived long enough to know that we are better than what we are now. We are better than what we are foreshadowing. We are better than what we see around us. We are far, far better than this. And so I know we can get to that place. I am always optimistic. I believe that we can move beyond where we are. But to do that, we have to be committed as a people. And that commitment comes with agreeing on a few things, that we must have electoral reform, that we must have a level playing field, and that we will not allow this government to get away with stealing of elections in the future, because that's what has put us in this place. The theft of elections, the hijacking of our political system and of our democracy, the hijacking of our legal system. All of that is what has put us in the position that we are. And we have to determine as a people that we need to stand up, take control of our situation, take control of our destiny, and demand the changes that we know we can effect.
Yes, Dr. Fountain, before I let you go and before I go over to Dr. Andre for his closing remarks, I really wanted to refer to something that Gabriel Christian mentioned. And the whole question of how do you, as a political leader, as someone who I believe has the ability to lead this nation and take it out of this crisis to recovery and to prosperity. I think you have the skill to do this. I think you're helping another foreign country do that now. You worked with the IMF. You've shown us that you've dealt with countries like St. Kitts and their situation has improved. Maybe if Pierre Charles was still alive and he was still listening to somebody like you, the situation might have been different, because I believe he was listening to you. But Gabriel is making a point. I mean, how do we call the people out and get them to come out? Really get them to come out and stand up for their rights. All the various associations, whether it's the public officers, whether it's the teachers or the nurses or the firemen or the police officers, all the people in the private sector, the farmers, the truckers, the bus drivers, all of these people there, all these professionals who are now being totally disregarded and sidelined, because foreign contractors say, and the government is proud to say, listen, these people repatriated 213 million last year. How much did you repatriate? So the question is, how do we do this and to get people together? Because I still see a lot of fragmentation and everybody trying to do a little thing on the side. But I don't hear one voice coming out and saying, let's act together as we did before in our Kudme. Because that's how our houses were built. It was Kudme, right? And so what are we doing about that now? And then, so I just wanted to sort of share some thoughts. And I know maybe I'm not sure whether you've crystallized your thoughts on that yet, because you have a party to speak to and to answer to. But tell us what you can about how you think this can be done, so that we can get people to come out and stand up for what they believe to make a better life for themselves.
I think the key is wrapping our heads around the same purpose, okay? And if we believe that we're fighting for the same thing, then that is what is going to unite us. So if we all believe that what we're fighting against is bad governance, then that is something that we can rally around. Obviously, we'll have differences, and what we need to be doing a lot more of is to be a bit more patient with others. You find that people say, oh, you guys not doing this, so we'll go ahead and do this, or But at the end of the day, divided efforts are not going to get us there. The only way we're going to succeed is if we work together. And I'm not saying that every single person has to join the United Workers' Party, but I'm saying that we can work together as opposition voices, opposition to malgovernance, opposition to bad governance, opposition to poverty, opposition to a failed state. We can all agree that we are living in a failed state and that we need to do something about it. And that involves speaking up. I know even our public servants, some of them are not even willing to stand up for their own salaries. I mean, how could you be a public servant and go for 6-7 years without getting any wage increase, and not one protest, not one seek out, not one action? So that says a lot. That says a lot. It tells me that our people have fallen asleep. So how do we wake them up? And that is the question. How do we wake them up? And we have to believe deeply that what we have in Dominica is not the best for the country. And if we can believe that, the only way we can redress that is to work together, then we'll come together. So my call is for us to unite. My call is for us to set aside our differences. My call is for us to support each other's efforts. But at the end of the day, coming together for a common purpose okay, of changing this government for a common purpose of bringing change to Dominica, uplifting the living standards of our people, uplifting our people, remedying what's wrong in our health system, in our education system, in our legal system, in our parliament, righting those wrongs. We can do it together, because I believe that those that are seeing right are a lot more than those who are doing wrong. And so we can come together. And my appeal, Mr. G, would be for all of us to work together. Let us listen to each other. Let us support each other. And let us agree on what the problem is. The problem is not our neighbor. The problem is not the other person. The problem is the bad governance we have in this country, and the ability for one man to dominate our lives to the extent that everybody else is shoved aside. Nothing is happening in the country. The country is going back. We are now the laughing stock of the world. Trillion in every single country. We have allowed that destruction to come upon us from one man. So how do we fight back? And we can fight back together, working collectively, respecting each other, but understanding that at the end of the day, unless we stand together, we are doomed to fail.
And Dr. Andre, and thank you for that, Dr. Fountain. Dr. Andre, it seems to me that one of the collectives that we can consider is that if people are convinced that there can be a better way, they can have a better quality of life, better living standards, because they've seen the countries that they migrate to, because they say they go to greener pastures. What did they go in there for? Better salaries, better income, the ability to be able to have a home, to be able to raise a family, to really have a better quality of life, better living conditions, to be able to afford standard of living. And it seems to me that if Dominicans can be convinced by leadership that in fact there is a better way to get there without having to migrate. People have always migrated for one reason or another. I mean, people migrated to England there many, many years ago, but the point is, you're never going to get all migration to end. But the fact of the matter is, those people who are going to remain in Dominica, I think they have to be convinced by leadership, and not just necessarily at the national level, but all politics is local. In the communities, the people, the same way we worked in the communities together, as Thompson is saying, work together to help build each other's homes and to help build each other's gardens and to help whenever a truck has a little problem, we've got to work on it to give us a push, whatever it is we have to do to get it back on the road. I think he's right. There has to be a coming together to, again, that collective mentality, just as we had before, but it could make, and so on. It has to come back to, people must now realize that they have to go back to working together, being each other's keeper, letting the community raise a child and raise the business and raise the people who are going to be resident there. Your thoughts, Dr. Andre, as to how we go about doing that as we try to take ourselves out of this situation?
Well, before I do, let me say thank you to Mr. G. Let me say thank you to the panelists. Let me say that without the leadership of the Q95 radio station, without the fact that the CEO has basically taken upon himself the task of giving hope to those who otherwise would have to remain mute and would have to speak in silence, who would whisper for things to get better, but who at least have a voice. Let me say that there is a place, special place for you and the work that you're doing. Let me indicate that, yes, one of the central difficulties that we have is that we're not speaking with one collective voice. What would precipitate a turnaround that would enable us to speak with one collective voice? If we all stand back and take an objective, frank, realistic view of where we are as an island nation, if we try to visualize it, if we look at Dominica now as a boat that has broken its moorings and is drifting aimlessly but inexorably towards the Niagara Falls, where the fate is predetermined, where the only reasonable outcome is death. If we look at the way or the extent to which we've sold our birthright, if we looked at the extent to which we have given foreigners our wealth, if we look at the extent to which we've sidelined Dominicans, if we look at the extent to which we have allowed our own businesses to be cast by the wayside, if we look at the extent to which the political directorate has helped itself to obscene raises in pay, if we look at the extent to which we have allowed our institutions such as hospitals to become caricatures of hospitals, to be known in a derisive and derogatory way as morgpitals, if we look at the extent to which we have allowed political persecution to go unchecked, if we look at all these things, we can only come to one conclusion. This ship of state is drifting slowly but inexorably towards a precipice, towards a Niagara Falls, where it will be shattered to bits. The only thing which can save that fate or prevent that fate is the collective actions of Dominicans who were stranded on that ship, some of whom were sleeping, some of whom were reading the Bible, some of whom are making fun and denigrating others. And just think of all those folk who are on that ship stranded, who decide to pull together, who decide to reach out for those rocks that they can cling to save that ship from sheer destruction. And as that fate is approached, those who had sucked the blood of the island of Dominica, they take off to luxurious pastures, whether in Dubai, whether it's in France, whether it's in America. If we allowed that fate to happen, then let me ask you, what more motivation do we need to get it together, to get our act together, to save not just the ship, but ourselves and our children, to save our scholarships, to save those at Grambling University Gabriel Christian was referring to save those who have tarpaulins over their roofs since Hurricane, whatever the name is, 6 years ago or 7, to give hope to the homeless, to give life to the 10 lepers. If we are motivated by that vision as to what is our fate, what is waiting for us, the calamity that haunts us, that stalks us like a bird of prey, like an animal, like that snake in the cage of pullets. If we look at our situation in that stark, realistic light, if we remove all the bling and all the nonsense about talk and pray that make the Saudis come and shower us with money, and if we say that we have to save ourselves by our own resources, every penny will fill that bank account, every modest contribution, every collective action, every collective spirit, every person who can play and who has to play a role in that redemptive effort. If we look at it from that perspective, then we will not say Lazarus was just a parable. It was the fate of a nation that found its strength at the 11th hour and rose and defeated all odds. If we look at it from that perspective, we will be great indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andre and Gabriel and Dr.
Thank you, Irving.
And all of
Thank
this
you.
on Facebook,
Thompson, thank you.
Thompson.
YouTube, and listening to us on the airwaves everywhere. I want to thank everybody. Just to say in parting, Gabriel, and I agree with you and Dr.
Thanks much and good night, guys.
And Dr. Thompson Fontaine, really and truly, what we need to do is to get into people's conscience, to make them realize that, there is a better way. Their life could have been better. But it has to be on a different system. It cannot work the way it is working now, because for the last 20 years, their life has not got better. So they have to be made to feel that they can try something else, a different way of doing it. And in fact, as I said, all politics is local. People have to feel at the local community level that the things can change, their lives can get better. Not at the big glamorous things, the big speeches at the national level, but right there in the communities, they must feel that together, they can work together to make their lives better. And I think leadership would have to ingrain that sort of education and that confidence in the people's consciousness. Gentlemen, thanks a lot. Appreciate having a discussion with you tonight. Let's do it again some other time. So good night.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
Sherwin.
you to all. Lambie,
Good night,
Thanks
everyone.
much, Mr. Jake.
Dr. Thompson,
Good night.
Yebu, obviously, Sherwin
God
in the
bless you.
background.
God bless you, Irving,
right,
Mr.
guys.
G, Lambi, Dr.
And
Thompson.
love. And your
Yes,
listeners.
thank you.
Thank
God
you.
bless.
Sorry we took up all Thompson's sleeping time, but anyway, he can
It
get
looks so. But as I said, it pays to have a coconut fiber mattress.
Ah, thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, yeah, yeah. Looking out my window, and I'm a thinking of tomorrow, and I'm a wondering what the future will be. Thinking of the children who are the victims of oppression, beaten down by wars and eaten up by starvation. I'm saying, when this ugly will be over, and the children can go out and play. I wanna see when all oppression will be done, and the people will rise up and say, freedom at last, freedom at last, so free, freedom has come, freedom has come, oh yeah. Shall I sitting in seclusion, I'm in my meditation, and I can hear the voice of the sufferers cry for justice. Ooh, another ugly war is raging, threats of nuclear war is rising, and the world is gripped by fear of mass destruction. I'm saying, when this ugly war be over, and the children can go out and play. I wanna see when all oppression will be done, and the people will rise up and say, freedom at last, freedom at last. So free, freedom has come, freedom has come, oh yeah, oh yeah. So much blood, sweat, and sorrows. There is no future for the youths of tomorrow. Yeah. So many mothers crying, too many funerals. Oh, when we lead when there's only will be over, and the children can go